Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's Lit Life with Miranda Reads. Today we're talking about February books, as in books that I have read this year in February. Quite a few of them were sent to me as a free copy in exchange for an honest review on Goodreads and my blog. They're not sent to me for anything else. So anything else I'm doing with them is something of my own choice and because I want to. So we're gonna go through these books and we're gonna rank them according to how much I enjoyed reading them. My categories are for today is slightly inspired by Harry Potter. We have at the top of the list, we have outstanding, followed by exceeds expectations, acceptable, poor, dreadful, and troll. So keep in mind that top three are like I enjoyed the book. Just to really be clear here, this is my personal opinion about these books. My opinion does change day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year. So there is a possibility that if I reread these books, I end up loving them or I might end up hating them. If I didn't like a book, it's just I didn't like it. It's not a personal attack on the author. It's not a decree against all of a genre. I just didn't like it that day. So kind of keep that in mind as I'm doing a ranking. So starting right off with A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas, aka The Master. I mean, is there any doubt? Of course it's going to be at outstanding. It is a stunning book. I love the way the characters were developed. It's going right at the top, right off the bat. It was a great book. So next one we have is Archibald Finch and The Lost Witches. This one was actually sent to me by the author, and he is, I believe, a self-published author, and I really did enjoy it. This one has illustrations with every chapter. And it follows like a little bit of a boy genius, and he gets sucked into this world of witches. His sister is still in the real world and she's trying to save him. There's something about this book, absolutely gorgeous illustrations. I would say it definitely exceeded expectations. I really enjoyed my time within these pages. Really keeping my fingers crossed that the author continues this series because he left me on a hanger and I cannot believe he did that to his audience. Like, it was very good. I'm very excited to see where he goes next. All right, let's see. I'm gonna start picking from the other side, I think. Yeah. All right, so now we have Undercover Bromance, and this one was sent to me by Berkeley Publishing. And it was a really cute book. It's all about these very rich, kind of very popular jock-like characters, where they're just like very macho men. They all seem to have trouble like with keeping their marriages together, and they decide to steal from the original source material on anything romance, the book genre. So these very beefy, burly men are huddling around the library, checking out the books at the cafes, and it's a really cute book. So I did enjoy this one quite a bit. So I'm gonna put that one up at exceeds expectations. Gosh, we're gonna have a lot of good ones. So the Sundown Moto, this one, I talked about it earlier about the best books in 2020, so I think that kind of gives away where it's gonna be ranked. Really enjoyed this one. I thought it was like a really cool concept. There's two storylines. One is 40 years ago, and it follows Vivian and she disappears. Second storyline is modern day, and it's the niece of Vivian going back to where her aunt disappeared and trying to figure out what happened. Supernatural element made it very memorable, so I'm definitely exceeds expectations. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she's a beautiful woman. She's a wonderful woman. I particularly enjoyed the illustrations for this one. Like, that was stunning. And it really made the book pop. And this one is a middle grade book, so it's a very quick read, but it's also a very enjoyable read. Abraham Lincoln. This one, I enjoyed it quite a bit. It talks about the story of Abraham Lincoln, and it goes a little bit through his childhood all the way up until his assassination. I thought it was a pretty good book. I wish there was a little bit less emphasis. I think it needs to need a little bit more characterization to really make it pop. But that being said, it was still a very good book. So next we have The Silent Patient. This one, in case you're wondering, shout out to Agatha. Hey there, sweetie. That's my turtle. So for The Silent Patient, this one follows a psychiatrist who joins an insane asylum, and he's particularly interested in one patient who murdered her husband and has never spoken since, and it's been years and years and years. She was an artist and she was very, very famous. Her husband was very famous, and it's a mystery that's rocked the world ever since it happened. So what the psychiatrist does is trying to figure out why, and he kind of delves very deep into the psychology and how that affects someone's day-to-day life. And this one, so I read it and I thought I was enjoying it, but it didn't. I don't know, like I think I was just expecting something like poor, dreadful, poor. I'm gonna go with dreadful because I was really expecting something like absolutely stunning. I read all these reviews that were like really like drew me into this book, and I just kind of like walked away feeling like, that's it? That's all? Really? There's nothing more? I don't know. I feel like this one had a lot of opportunity to like really bring things up to the top notch, but it just didn't happen, which was really disappointing for me. These Nameless Things, this one was sent to me by a publishing company. The premise of this one was stunning. It had like this mountain, and every so often someone comes out of the mountain and they're broken, bruised, and bloody, and they can't remember what happened under the mountain. And our main character, all he really remembers is that his brother is under the mountain, and he has to go back and get him, and he has to decide whether or not he goes through with it. And it ended up being like a pretty good book, but it seemed a little bit too forward on some of the metaphors. Like it was very clearly borrowing inspiration from something, and it was a little bit too heavy. I'll put it up at exceeds expectations because the premise was really, really stunning, and I really enjoyed that. It just felt a little bit predictable at times, and a little bit the dialogue felt a little bit stilted as well, and that's what kept it from going up to outstanding. The Night Country. Oh my gosh. I loved it. I've already talked about this one a lot, so I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Just very, very good. It had the premise of like, what if those creepy fairy tales were actually real, and how would that affect someone in real life? And I really enjoyed the way that one was put together. So then we have The Clares, and this one follows 4 non-identical quadruplets, and every 17 years they get reborn, and they slowly become more and more evil until they are killed. And this one was pretty good. This was a companion book to a 4-book series, but I don't think you need to read this series in order to enjoy it. There were some aspects that really did kind of get me, kind of make me think that reading this series probably would have helped. But for the most part, I did quite enjoy this one, and each sister has a different psychic power, which ended up being a pretty interesting dynamic, so exceeds expectations. So Stealing Thunder, this one was sent to me by Berkeley Publishing / Ace Books, and this one focuses on a trans princess, and it ended up being a pretty good book. So I think it's going to go under acceptable, because it ended up being pretty good. Some of the dialogue was a little bit slow in the first quarter to half of the book, and that ended up taking me a little bit out of the book. But for the most part, I did rather enjoy it. So I'm going to put it under acceptable. Oh, Over in the Woodland. Okay, so this one was sent to me by Familius Publishing, and it's a counting / bedtime picture book for children, and it's very, very cute. I really enjoyed how all of the families shown, like all the little magical families, were single parents and their kids. I've seen a lot of Mommy and Me books. I've seen a lot of Mommy, Daddy and Me books, but not so many books that really just focus on Daddy and Me or Mommy and Me. And I really liked how that was like a common theme throughout the book. Plus the illustrations, gorgeous. I think I'm gonna put it up at outstanding, because even though it is a picture book, it really did take me by surprise, and I ended up enjoying it a lot. Hi, Buzz. What's up? You wanna help? Okay, so shout out to my little helper. How you doing, Bug? You gonna help me decide on how to do things? Okay. So Navigating Indie World focuses on how to publish if you are an independent publisher or independent author, and where do you go in order to publish your book, and what are the steps to get your book to a marketable level. Anyway, I ended up liking this one quite a bit. It was really interesting to watch, more so like read, how does the publishing world work when you are an indie publisher? And that ended up making it quite a fun book for me. I really did enjoy learning the behind the scenes, especially considering I get so many indie books to read. It's fun to kind of learn what they do in order to get the book into my hands. So that one is definitely exceeds expectations. Monster Diary 3. This is another Familius publishing book, and it was really cute. So Marvin's Monster Diary is a series where the main character, the monster, he has issues, I think it's like an ADD like issue where he just can't focus, and all of his friends have something else, like his friend Lissa gets mad very easily, etc., etc. So he talks about different ways that he as a kid can understand and deal with when he gets overwhelmed or when he gets really distracted. One thing I really like about this book series is that they are definitely getting better with each book. So like the first one was pretty good. The second one started to have some character development, and the third one ended up working out really well. So I'm gonna pop that up to exceeds expectations. So Marketing Indie World is also published by Carol Roman as well as 2 other authors. This one focuses more about the marketing aspects of publishing a book, because once you publish a book, you really have to work hard to get it into people's hands. So for this one, I think I enjoyed it, and I'm going to definitely put it under acceptable. I think the difference between this one and Navigating Indie World is that Navigating seemed to have a little bit more personable tone, and I think I enjoyed that one a little bit more, versus Marketing felt a little bit too formulaic to me. However, it was still an enjoyable book, and it was still interesting to learn what all the authors are doing behind the scenes, so I put it under acceptable. Next we have Kerrys Party Sunday, and this one was sent to me by an indie author, and it is the second book of a series, but from what I can tell, you don't really need to read the series in order. They're just kind of like a different adventures that Kerry goes on. Kerry and her sister Mary had a very busy Saturday, and now it is Sunday. Kerry notices that there's a new boy moved in next door, and the two of them go on an adventure because apparently the new boy's about to be kidnapped by aliens, and they have to find a bus ticket to London. They meet all these little quirky characters, and they end up having quite a fun adventure, and they hear stories, they go on a treasure hunt, etc., etc. This one took me by surprise. I really enjoyed it. I didn't know what to expect coming into this book, and I left pleasantly surprised. I really liked the illustrations scattered in throughout. Alright, so that one definitely throwing it up at exceeds expectations. Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I read this one via audiobook. Jim Dale, love him. The issue I have with this one is just first 4 Harry Potter books, like they're build and build and build. Order of the Phoenix is when we start to have some more of the serious situations, and I would say this one exceeds expectations, almost into outstanding, but I can never forgive the death at the end, so that's going to bump it down to exceeds expectations. How to Bake for Beginners. Just finished this one and really enjoyed it as well. This was sent to me as part of the Callisto Publishing Club, and for this one is all about baking if you haven't really done it and you haven't really been taught. So it talks about like, why do you need baking soda versus baking powder? What does it mean to cream your ingredients together? Sort of stuff that like all the recipes use these terms, but they don't always tell you what to do and what to look for. So for that, I really did enjoy this one. I wish there was more. Because like this is like had a very good basis, but like there's so much in cooking that I feel like there could have easily been pages and pages more, like teaching techniques, teaching lingo, all kinds of like little tips and tricks. But that being said, the recipes in there are very easy to do and very foolproof for the most part. They're very forgiving recipes, and I always do like recipes that are very forgiving because I tend to get a little bit distracted, so definitely exceeds expectations. So for Green Witchcraft, this one ended up being a fun book. It's I'm not very familiar with witchcraft books in general, but this one focuses on green witchcraft, which is kind of like more of a nature-oriented, kind of communing with nature sort of aspect to it. As someone who's never really gotten into anything like that before, it provided an interesting outlook, and I do like some aspects of it, like how a kitchen witch will grow herbs and everything. I think this one really should have had a little bit more illustrations, and there's definitely aspects that it could have gone into a lot more. And I think that would have really rounded out the book. I did enjoy reading this one. And like, I came away knowing more than I did going in, so I'd put it under acceptable. So Gods and Goddesses of Ancient Egypt. So I'm not as familiar with ancient Egyptian gods as I am with Greek and Roman gods. That being said, this one provided a pretty good introduction to the concept. It was a little bit confusing for me at first, especially when you're trying to like figure out who's who and how the different stories relate. But for the most part, I did quite enjoy it. I think there's a lot of gods, and I suppose that is very true with ancient Egyptian gods. There ended up being a lot of them, and it made it a little bit difficult for me to kind of stay caught into the story, because I just felt like I was grasping for names a lot, and that kind of took me out of the book. But that being said, I did enjoy it, so acceptable. So Girl Stop Apologizing is an incredibly catchy book, and there are things that work really well, and there's things on it that I feel are just like a little bit problematic. So I'm going to definitely acceptable. Does it exceed expectations? I'm going to probably leave it as exceeds expectations, mostly because at the end of the day, I did enjoy it, and I did kind of walk away with like all right, I'm gonna do some things sort of attitude, and I ended up really feeling like I got something out of this book. But that being said, Be Not Far From Me, just throwing it up there right away, like, oh, this was so good. So this one follows Ashley. She gets stranded in the woods, her foot is busted, and she has to find her way out before she dies of exposure. Very Hatchet / Into the Wild vibe to it. I was there and I loved it. And we have Cersei. So for this one, we follow Cersei, and she's considered like the mother of all witches. And she was the daughter of Zeus and a nymph, and she has her own magic that she uses plants for. Kind of like what we were talking about with the green witchcraft. So for this one, so I loved it and I hated it. And I feel like that's very weird to say that at the same time, but it really is, that's how it happened. So Cersei goes through the different Greek god myths involving her, and then kind of like gives you kind of like a humanizing look at how the gods act. Cersei, the book, does a really good job of making that understandable to the audience. And in the cases where like the legend of Cersei, like I understood the legend, or like I knew of it ahead of time, I followed the book really, really well, and I was able to kind of sew together the parts from the Greek myths that I knew, and then like how they're weaving them into this book. However, when I didn't know the myth ahead of time, I was very lost, and I ended up not really enjoying it that much. So it kind of had like a very up and down roller coaster for me. And for the most part, I would say it's between acceptable and poor. And when it ended, I was just kind of more disappointed than I was enthusiastic, so I'm going to put it down at poor. The last one I read in February was Broken Thorn by Victoria Aveyard. This one was not sent to me, and I would highly doubt that she would ever send me a book, judging from my previous angry expressions. And I'm just gonna be right away, this one's going down to the troll. This one just, ugh. So this is the, let's see, 5th book in this series technically, but I guess this one's like a series of short stories. The previous 4 books I didn't like. I knew I wasn't gonna like this one coming in, but I decided to read it anyway because I was kind of curious to see if she'll ever like try and fill in the plot holes that the other 4 books left gaping open. The answer is yes, but in the most annoying way possible. The premise of this book is that Silverbloods are humans with silver blood, and they have like powers, kind of think of like off-brand X-Men sort of powers. And then red bloods are like humans and they don't have any powers. Mare is a red blood who discovers she has powers, and then she spends like 3 or 4 books recruiting armies and just generally being a nuisance. And I didn't like the books at all, and there really wasn't much of a redeeming factor to it. I think that the most annoying thing is like the author has this habit of repeating everything 2 or 3 times within the same paragraph. And then Mare, the main character, is a very, very dramatic teenager. And even though she's supposed to be like growing and maturing, you don't see that character development. Yeah, it was a waste of time. I really wish I could get that time back, but what are you gonna do? So that's it. That is my ranking. Started off with a really high note, ended with probably the lowest low note I've had in a long time. But for the most part, like, it was a good month. Like, everything was at least acceptable. Almost everything was acceptable to exceed expectations. Thank you so much for watching, and happy reading.